Part 1. We journeyed through the birth of an empire, from the mists of post-Roman Britain and the forging of a kingdom, to the fires of faith that broke with Rome and the waves that defeated the Spanish Armada. We witnessed how a small island kingdom became a seafaring nation, planting its first colonies across the Atlantic and building wealth through trade, sugar, and the triangular routes that bound 3 continents together. A realm driven by ambition, yet shadowed by contradiction. Now, in Part 2, the story transforms. The age of merchants and wooden ships gives way to the age of steam and steel. We'll follow Britain as it harnesses the power of the Industrial Revolution, extends its reach to every corner of the globe, and builds an empire on which the sun never sets. From the jewel of India to the scramble for Africa, from the thunder of 2 world wars to the quiet dignity of independence, this is the epic of a nation that ruled the waves, reshaped the world, and learned that empires, like all things, must one day transform. So settle in and let the story unfold. This is the entire history of the British Empire. By the middle of the 18th century, the empire that had once been carved by swords and sails began to forge itself anew through iron and steam. The age of discovery was giving way to the age of invention. Smoke rose over the green hills of England, and the rhythm of the nation changed from the steady pulse of the sea to the pounding of pistons and gears. The Industrial Revolution was not simply an age of machines. It was a transformation of the human condition itself. It altered how people lived, how they worked, and how they imagined the world. And in doing so, it reshaped the British Empire into something the world had never seen before, a dominion of industry and capital, ruled not by monarchs alone, but by merchants, inventors, and bankers. The origins of this revolution lay deep in the soil and rivers of Britain. Coal, the black diamond of the earth, burned beneath its hills, feeding furnaces that smelted iron and powered steam engines. Waterways like the Severn and the Clyde became arteries of energy, their mills spinning cotton, their barges carrying goods to distant ports. James Watt's improvements to the steam engine in the 1770s unleashed power no longer bound by muscle, wind, or water. "I sell here," he said, "what all the world desires to have power." It was power that could move ships without wind, pump mines without rivers, and drive wheels without rest. Factories sprang up across the land, from Manchester to Birmingham, from Sheffield to Glasgow. Towns that had once been small villages exploded into smoky metropolises. Brick chimneys replaced church steeples. And the new gospel was productivity. The age of miracles wrote historian Arnold Toynbee, had given way to the age of machines. In less than a century, England transformed from a rural kingdom into the workshop of the world. Its textiles clothed Africa and Asia. Its engines powered locomotives in every corner of Europe. And its ships, built of iron rather than oak, carried trade to every continent. The empire's wealth no longer came solely from colonies or conquest, but from the mastery of motion itself. Yet the revolution was not merely mechanical, it was social. A new class rose from the smoke, the bourgeoisie, the middle class of entrepreneurs, engineers, and industrialists. Men like Richard Arkwright, Josiah Wedgwood, and George Stephenson became the new aristocracy. Their factories, their castles, their ledgers, their heraldry. The old feudal order began to crumble. Power shifted from landowners to those who could harness capital. Money, wrote Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations, 1776, is the great wheel of circulation. His words captured the ethos of the age. Profit became virtue. Efficiency became morality. The Industrial Revolution gave birth to an urban civilization unlike any in history. London swelled to over 1 million inhabitants by 1800, becoming the largest city in the world, a vast labyrinth of wealth and want. Its streets teemed with carriages and beggars, silk and soot. To the west, the mansions of bankers glittered with chandeliers. To the east, in the slums of Whitechapel, children worked by candlelight. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Charles Dickens would later write, summing up the contradictions of progress. The empire's prosperity came at a human cost: 12-hour days, child labor, and lives shortened by factory air. Yet the belief endured that England's destiny lay in its industry, that through machinery it had been chosen to master both nature and nations. While the furnaces roared, revolutions abroad tested the empire's resolve. Across the Atlantic, in 1776, the 13 American colonies declared independence from British rule. What began as a tax dispute over tea and representation became a war for the very meaning of freedom. George III, the Hanoverian king, saw rebellion. The colonists saw revolution. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Thomas Jefferson wrote that all men are created equal. To the British crown, such words were sedition. To history, they became prophecy. The American War of Independence shook the empire to its core. The colonies that had been England's pride, the birthplace of self-government and enterprise, were lost after 8 bitter years.
The Treaty of Paris in 1783 confirmed what no one in London had thought possible: the empire could bleed. Many in Parliament saw it as the end of Britain's greatness, but others saw something else, the beginning of reinvention. "We have lost an empire," said one minister, "but we have found a world." The defeat forced Britain to look eastward to India, China, and beyond, where fortunes greater than Virginia's tobacco or Massachusetts's timber awaited. The Atlantic Empire had ended. The global empire had begun. In Asia, the East India Company stepped into the void left by America's loss. Its private armies conquered new territories. Its administrators built cities that rivaled London in scale. Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras became jewels of commerce and command. The wealth of India, its cotton, indigo, and tea flowed into British mills and teapots. At the same time, the industrial economy gave Britain the means to tighten its grip. Steamships replaced sail. Railways cut through jungles and plains, and telegraphs bound colonies to the motherland in lines of electric light. Historian David Landis called it the second conquest of the world, this time not by soldiers, but by engineers. As the 18th century gave way to the 19th, Britain's industrial might turned it into the banker of nations. The city of London became the financial capital of the world. Its institutions, Barings, Rothschilds, and the Bank of England financing trade, war, and empire. Sterling became the currency of global exchange, and London's stock market, the pulse of world commerce. Ships carrying British goods departed every minute. Those returning brought cotton from India, tea from Ceylon, wool from Australia, and gold from Africa. The empire's wealth circulated through a network of ports and banks so vast that one statesman quipped, "The sun never sets up our ledgers." The new technologies of communication and transport transformed distance itself. Railways became the empire's veins, pumping goods and people through the industrial heartland. The first public railway opened in 1825 between Stockton and Darlington. By mid-century, thousands of miles of track crisscrossed the British Isles. The locomotive, that iron beast of smoke and speed, became both symbol and servant of progress. George Stephenson's rocket revolutionized travel, shrinking time and space. The Iron Road, as Victorians called it, united not only cities, but ideas. Newspapers could now circulate nationwide. Workers could migrate for labor. Families could dream of horizons once unimaginable. In this world of steam and steel, Britain's navy evolved once more. Wooden ships gave way to ironclads, wind to engine. The Royal Navy became an unstoppable force, ensuring that British goods and British laws could reach every shore. At its height, Britain controlled over half the world's shipping tonnage. Command of the sea. Admiral Alfred Thayer Mahan would later write, is command of history. The Industrial Revolution had turned the seas from boundaries into extensions of the factory floor. Meanwhile, Europe was convulsed by another kind of revolution, the one born in France. In 1789, cries of liberté, égalité, fraternité echoed across the continent. Monarchies trembled, empires quaked. Out of that chaos rose Napoleon Bonaparte, a man whose ambition sought to reorder the world. For 2 decades, Britain stood almost alone against him, from the sands of Egypt to the snows of Russia. Napoleon's armies swept across Europe, toppling thrones and redrawing maps. Yet his empire, like all before it, found its limit at the sea. Britain's isolation, once its vulnerability, became its strength. Shielded by the Channel and sustained by its navy, the island became a fortress of resistance. Its factories supplied armies, its gold financed coalitions, and its fleets blockaded French ports. The Battle of Trafalgar in 1805 marked the turning point. There, off the coast of Spain, Admiral Horatio Nelson led 27 British ships against 33 of Napoleon's and emerged victorious, though he himself was mortally wounded. His last signal to his fleet: England expects that every man will do his duty, became legend. With that victory, Britain secured mastery of the seas for the next 100 years. When Napoleon was finally defeated at Waterloo in 1815, Britain stood unrivaled. Its empire spanned the globe. Its navy ruled the oceans, and its factories filled the world with the hum of progress. The 19th century would later be called the Pax Britannica, an era of peace imposed by British power. Yet beneath that peace, the contradictions of empire persisted. The same nation that prided itself on liberty governed millions without consent. The same factories that created wealth in Manchester produced poverty in Bengal. As one Indian reformer observed bitterly, England has given us her machines, but taken away our bread. Still, to the Victorians, empire seemed both destiny and duty. The marriage of industry and empire produced a faith in progress that bordered on religion. God has made of us an instrument, wrote Lord Palmerston, to spread civilization across the earth. Steamships carried missionaries, and merchants alike. Telegraphs carried orders and ideas. The empire became a living network, a machine whose pistons were men, whose oil was trade, whose rhythm was profit. The British believed they had found the secret of history, that order, wealth, and morality could coexist beneath the banner of empire. But as the age of machines advanced, so too did its discontents. In the slums of London and Liverpool, workers demanded rights. In the colonies, subjects demanded recognition. The very forces that had liberated Britain from dependence on land now threatened to enslave others to its economy. The philosopher Karl Marx, observing from his exile in London, called it the engine of contradiction, a system that built prosperity on exploitation. Yet for much of the 19th century, those contradictions remained buried beneath the grandeur of progress. The Industrial Revolution had begun as a spark in a coal mine. It ended as a fire that illuminated the world. It powered ships across oceans, laid rails across continents, and connected markets that had never before met. It made Britain rich beyond imagination, but also bound it to the fate of the world it had created. By 1820, a child born in Manchester could wear cotton spun in India, drink tea grown in Ceylon, and read news of wars fought in Africa all in a single afternoon. The empire was no longer distant. It was everywhere, woven into the fabric of daily life. Looking back, one historian wrote, "England conquered the world in the name of efficiency. Steam replaced the sword. Commerce replaced crusade. And industry replaced faith. Yet beneath the roar of engines and the gleam of progress, the same question that haunted the empire's beginnings remained whether power built on inequality could ever truly be righteous. For now, however, the answer was drowned by the whistle of trains and the thunder of ships. The Imperial Revolution had begun, and the world was moving to Britain's rhythm. When the cannons of Waterloo finally fell silent in 1815, Europe lay in ruins. Empires had risen and crumbled under Napoleon's ambition. Monarchs had fled and returned, and the map of the world had been rewritten in blood. Yet out of the chaos, one power emerged, not just victorious, but transformed the British Empire. The wars that had drained the continent had made Britain rich. Its factories had supplied the armies that defeated Napoleon. Its navy had blockaded his ports. Its banks had financed his enemies. And now, as peace settled over Europe, Britain stood alone as the master of the seas and the banker of the world. For nearly a century, this peace would endure a century the historians would later call Pax Britannica. the Peace of Britain. The term did not mean the absence of conflict. It meant the absence of rivals. From 1815 until the outbreak of the First World War in 1914, no power could challenge Britain's global supremacy. Its navy, unmatched in size and technology, ruled every ocean. The two-power standard, established by Parliament, decreed that the Royal Navy must be as strong as the next two largest fleets combined. British ships flew their flag from the Arctic to the Antipodes, from the Cape of Good Hope to the coast of Japan. Wherever wood can swim, there I command, declared Admiral Lord St. Vincent. The wooden walls of old had become iron fortresses, armored with steel and driven by steam. This command of the seas allowed Britain to knit the world together in a web of trade and influence. Steamships carried goods and people faster than ever before. Telegraph cables stretched beneath the oceans, binding colonies to London by invisible wires. A message that once took months to reach India could now arrive in minutes. The world, one observer wrote, has been reduced to the dimensions of England itself. The empire became not merely a realm of territories, but a network, a living system of ports, coaling stations, and trade routes through which goods, capital, and ideas flowed endlessly. In this age of dominance, the British flag planted itself in new and strategic corners of the globe. In 1819, Sir Stamford Raffles established Singapore at the tip of the Malay Peninsula, a tiny island that would become the gateway to Asia. Its deep harbor and free port attracted merchants from China, India, and Europe, transforming it into a bustling entrepot where East met West under the Union Jack. Singapore, Raffles wrote, is to be the fulcrum upon which the commerce of Asia will turn. He was right. The same year, the British occupied Malacca and Penang, securing their hold over the Strait of Malacca, the narrow passage through which the wealth of the Orient passed. Farther east, the empire extended its hand to China. The Opium Wars of the 1840s, waged in the name of free trade, but rooted in moral hypocrisy, ended with the Treaty of Nanking. Britain, victorious, forced China to open its ports to British merchants and ceded to them a small rocky island on the Pearl River Delta, Hong Kong. What began as a barren outpost soon grew into one of the busiest ports in the world. A barren rock, with scarcely a house upon it, sneered a critic in Parliament. Yet within decades, it was a city of commerce, its harbors glittering with ships from every nation. Hong Kong became the empire's eastern sentinel, the embodiment of its maritime power, and mercantile reach. To the south, the British secured another vital link in their global chain, Cape Town. Captured from the Dutch during the Napoleonic Wars, the Cape Colony was the key to the route around Africa. Its position at the meeting point of the Atlantic and Indian Oceans made it indispensable. The British built fortresses, harbors, and railways, transforming it into a stopover for ships bound for India and the Far East. Cape Town became known as the Tavern of the Seas, where every vessel flying the Union Jack paused to take on coal, water, and news. But perhaps no conquest symbolized Britain's imperial reach more than Egypt. In 1869, the opening of the Suez Canal changed the world. The canal connected the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, slicing travel time between London and Bombay by thousands of miles. To the British, it was not just a waterway. It was the lifeline of empire. When financial crisis struck Egypt in the 1870s, British bankers moved swiftly to take control of the canal's shares. By 1882, under the guise of restoring order, British troops occupied Egypt, turning it into a protectorate in all but name. The canal, wrote Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli, is the key to India, and India is the key to our greatness. With Egypt in their hands, Britain's dominion stretched seamlessly from the North Sea to the Indian Ocean, from Gibraltar to Singapore. While the empire expanded outward, it also imposed inward order, a system of law, finance, and administration that would shape the modern world. The British pound became the global currency of trade, backed by the gold reserves of the Bank of England. London, rebuilt in the grandeur of the Victorian Age, became the financial capital of the planet. Its banks financed railways in Argentina, mines in South Africa, and factories in Bombay. The insurance markets of Lloyd's underwrote the risks of global commerce, ensuring that no voyage was too distant, no cargo too perilous. The city, wrote one French observer, is not merely the heart of England, it is the treasury of mankind. British law, too, followed the flag. Across continents, colonies adopted the principles of common law, trial by jury, property rights, and the supremacy of written statutes. English became the language of commerce, diplomacy, and administration. The empire exported not only goods, but governance. Its bureaucrats, trained in London's civil service, ruled distant territories with a mixture of arrogance and efficiency. They built an empire on the back of a notebook, one Indian historian remarked, and ruled it with the ink of bureaucracy. Even as critics decried imperial exploitation, Others saw in it the foundations of the modern global order, the rule of law, the stability of markets, and the free flow of trade. This was the century when the phrase, "the sun never sets," on the British Empire became more than a boast. It became literal truth. From Canada to Australia, from Africa to Asia. Britain's dominion spanned every time zone. When night fell on the Thames, it was dawn in Calcutta. When shadows lengthened over Hong Kong, they shortened over the Caribbean. "The sun," said the writer George Macartney, "never sets upon our possessions. Our commerce may be pursued without interruption of darkness." It was an empire of light, at least in its own imagination, an empire that saw itself as the custodian of progress and civilization. But beneath that confidence lay the darker reality of empire, the expansion of colonial rule under the banner of moral duty. In India, British control deepened after the collapse of the Mughal Empire. The East India Company's dominion, already vast, grew ever more absolute. Railways, telegraphs, and canals transformed the landscape. But they served the interests of the empire more than its people. The civilizing mission, as it was called, cloaked exploitation in virtue. British officers spoke of bringing order to chaos, law to tyranny, light to darkness. "We are here," said Lord Macaulay in 1835, "to educate a people who cannot yet govern themselves." Yet for the millions of Indians whose resources and labor fueled Britain's prosperity, the empire's light often felt like shadow. The contradictions of Pax Britannica were starkest in Africa. Following the abolition of the slave trade in 1807, Britain declared itself the moral leader of a new world order. Its navy patrolled the Atlantic, intercepting slave ships and freeing their human cargo. In Sierra Leone, liberated Africans founded the colony of Freetown, a symbol of redemption. But abolition soon gave way to expansion. The same ships that suppressed slavery began establishing new colonies under the pretext of protection and progress. By mid-century, British explorers like David Livingstone and Henry Morton Stanley mapped the continent's interior, paving the way for imperial partition. The mission of salvation became the machinery of empire. Commerce, Christianity, and civilization, Livingstone's triad of virtue, was, in practice, the prelude to conquest. In the Middle East, Britain's influence grew along with its need for routes and resources. The Persian Gulf became a British lake. Treaties bound Arab rulers to the crown. In the 1830s, the British seized Aden, securing the southern entrance to the Red Sea. Later, they would extend their reach to Kuwait, Bahrain, and omen, ensuring dominance over the oil-rich lands long before oil became the lifeblood of modernity. The empire's frontier stretched not by armies alone, but by contracts, railways, and telegraphs. At home, the Victorians celebrated their global supremacy as proof of divine favor. The Great Exhibition of 1851, held in the Crystal Palace, displayed the empire's achievements under one glittering roof: steam engines, textiles, jewels, and maps that colored a quarter of the world red. Queen Victoria, the grandmother of Europe, reigned over an empire that seemed eternal. "Look upon this empire," proclaimed Prince Albert at the opening ceremony, "and see the triumph of peace and industry." It was peace, indeed, but peace on Britain's terms, secured by the ironclad and the gunboat. The power of Pax Britannica rested not only on military strength, but on perception. Britain's enemies saw it as invincible, its subjects as inevitable. The empire justified itself as a force of order in a chaotic world, a bringer of trade and law. "We are the trustees of civilization," declared Lord Curzon, "and the guardians of the backward races." Such words masked the reality of exploitation, but also reflected a genuine belief that empire was not just a right, but a responsibility. The Victorians convinced themselves that their dominance was moral, their conquest benevolent, their wealth a blessing for all. It was an illusion powerful enough to endure for generations. Yet even as Britain imposed peace abroad, tension brewed within. Industrial laborers demanded representation. Irish nationalists sought freedom. Colonized peoples murmured of rebellion. The empire's order was never entirely secure. It rested on the silent consent of those who bore its burdens. The Empire, wrote novelist Joseph Conrad, is a tale told by those who hold the whip. But for a time, the illusion of harmony held. The seas were calm, the markets open, the world, so it seemed, at peace. The 19th century would be remembered as Britain's golden age, when commerce and conscience, law and empire seemed to march in unison. Its ships carried half the world's goods. Its language became the tongue of diplomacy and trade. From Westminster to Bombay, from Cape Town to Melbourne, the rhythms of British life: tea at 4, cricket on Sundays. The rule of law echoed across continents. "We have made the world English," said Lord Salisbury with pride. But beneath that pride, the clock was already ticking. The peace of Britain, like all empires before it, was not eternal. Its order depended on obedience, its prosperity on inequality, its confidence on denial. For now, though, the illusion held firm. The Union Jack fluttered over 1/5 of the world's land and 1/4 of its people. The Royal Navy patrolled the seas with unmatched power, its ships like floating symbols of law and commerce. And in London, as the bells of St. Paul's rang over the fog, the British believed that they had achieved what no civilization before them had done, that they had brought order to the chaos of mankind. The sun never sets on the British Empire, they said with pride. But history would one day add its own reply that the sun which never set would one day fade, not in defeat, but in the long twilight of its own creation. For centuries, the British Empire had expanded through seas and trade winds, through steam and iron, but nowhere did its ambition shine more brightly, nor its conscience bleed more deeply than in India. It was the empire's greatest triumph and its most haunting contradiction, a land of immeasurable wealth and unimaginable suffering, where faith, beauty, and power collided under the shadow of a single crown. India was not merely a colony, it was the heart of the empire, its jewel and its wound. The story began not with armies, but with merchants. When Queen Elizabeth I granted a royal charter to the East India Company in 1600, it was simply a trading venture, a band of investors seeking profit from the spice markets of Asia. Its ships carried cloth, silver, and ambition. Its merchants built factories along India's coasts, negotiating with Mughal emperors and local princes. But trade has a way of turning into power. Over the next 2 centuries, as the Mughal Empire declined, the company filled the vacuum through war, diplomacy, and corruption. It transformed from a business into a sovereign force. By the mid-18th century, the East India Company had become a kingdom in all but name. It maintained its own army, minted its own coins, and ruled millions of subjects. The turning point came in 1757 at the Battle of Plassey, when Robert Clive, a company officer, defeated the Nawab of Bengal with the help of bribed courtiers. The victory gave the company control of Bengal, the richest province in India, and access to its vast revenues. We have acquired a revenue larger than that of any European state, Clive wrote, scarcely aware of the storm he had unleashed. The conquest of India would now be waged not by kings, but by clerks and accountants, from Calcutta to Madras, from Bombay to Delhi. The East India Company imposed a new order. its soldiers sepoys. Indian men under British command enforced its will. Its officials collected taxes, codified laws, and built roads and telegraph lines. It claimed to bring civilization and justice. Yet its rule drained India of wealth and dignity. The phrase "drain of India" entered the political vocabulary, an acknowledgement that the riches of the subcontinent were flowing endlessly to London. A single district of Bengal, observed the economist Dadabhai Naoroji, could feed all of England, and yet its people starve. The contradictions of empire deepened with each passing decade. The company built schools and courts, yet dismantled traditional industries. It abolished certain customs, yet misunderstood the faith that sustained them. British reformers, armed with Victorian morality, sought to remake Indian society in their own image. The abolition of sati, the ritual immolation of widows, was hailed as progress, but it was also wielded as proof of European superiority. Missionaries preached salvation, while traders extracted profit. "We come as teachers and benefactors," wrote one company official, "but we must rule as masters." The line between enlightenment and arrogance grew ever thinner. In 1857, that tension erupted in flames. It began with a rumor that the new cartridges issued to Indian soldiers were greased with cow and pig fat, an offense both to Hindus and Muslims. What followed was not merely a mutiny, but a rebellion, an explosion of rage after a century of humiliation. Sepoys rose against their British officers in Meerut, then marched on Delhi, proclaiming the restoration of the old Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah II. The revolt spread across northern India, from Lucknow to Kanpur. Villages joined the insurgency. European families were massacred. British vengeance was merciless. "It was not war," wrote one survivor, "but judgment." The rebellion known in British history as the Sepoy Mutiny, and in India as the First War of Independence, lasted more than a year. When it ended, the company's authority was shattered. In 1858, the British Parliament dissolved the East India Company and placed India directly under the Crown. Queen Victoria became Empress of India, and the British Raj was born. The transfer, wrote historian William Dalrymple, was not the end of empire. It was its perfection. Under the Raj, India was remade once again. The British brought railways, telegraphs, and irrigation systems, claiming to modernize the subcontinent. By 1900, India had the fourth largest railway network in the world, 30,000 miles of track, binding together an empire of faiths and languages. The railways, intended for commerce and control, became symbols of both connection and contradiction. They carried soldiers and merchants, pilgrims and peasants. They united the land even as they deepened its divisions. "The Iron Road," wrote Rudyard Kipling, "runs from sea to sea, and the pulse of empire beats along its rails." Yet the order of the Raj was not built on equality. It was built on hierarchy of race, class, and caste. The British lived in enclaves, bungalows shaded by palm trees, clubs that excluded Indians, cities divided by color. "We rule from above," said Lord Lytton, "for they are not yet ready to stand beside us." The Indian elite, princes, landlords, and Western educated professionals were courted and rewarded. But beneath them, millions of peasants bore the weight of taxation and famine. The Bengal famine of 1876 to 78 killed over 2 million people, even as grain was exported overseas. Empire had brought order, but it was the order of a ledger book, not of justice. For the British, India was both the jewel and the justification of empire. It was the proof that Britain's global mission was not conquest, but civilization. In 1876, Queen Victoria took the title Empress of India, an act of symbolic grandeur orchestrated by her Prime Minister, Benjamin Disraeli. At the Delhi Durbar of 1877, the British staged a ceremony of imperial pageantry unrivaled in history. Princes and maharajas, draped in silks and jewels, bowed before portraits of a queen who had never set foot on their soil. The event blended spectacle with subjugation. Here, wrote one observer, was the theater of empire, where illusion became reality. But India was more than a possession. It was a mirror. To the Victorians, it reflected both their pride and their doubt. They saw in its temples and philosophies an ancient civilization equal to their own, yet alien in its depth. The English romanticized India's spirituality, even as they dismissed it as superstition. Poets like Edwin Arnold translated the Bhagavad Gita. Artists painted scenes of the Taj Mahal under moonlight. Scholars like Max Muller studied Sanskrit texts, calling them the lost language of the soul. The empire that had conquered India also found itself captivated by it. If India is the jewel in the crown, wrote historian John Strachey, it is a jewel that changes the crown itself. This cultural exchange was profound, though rarely equal. British architecture blended with Mughal design, creating grand edifices like the Victoria Terminus in Bombay and the Gateway of India. Indian musicians performed in London salons. English fabrics borrowed Indian motifs, paisley chintz, and cashmere became staples of Western fashion. Curry appeared on English dinner tables. Tea from Assam became a national obsession. Yet even as the empire absorbed India's art and flavor, it denied its people political voice. The contradiction was impossible to ignore. "We are their teachers," said one British officer, "but not their equals." The seeds of nationalism began to take root in the very soil of empire. English education, intended to produce loyal clerks and civil servants, instead produced thinkers who questioned British rule. Men like Raja Ram Mohan Roy and later Dadabhai Naoroji and Bal Gangadhar Tilak argued that the empire's promises of justice and civilization were hollow. In 1885, the Indian National Congress was formed a forum for debate that would, in time, become the voice of independence. "The Raj," wrote Naoroji, "is like a knife of sugar, sweet on the surface, sharp beneath. The jewel in the crown was beginning to cut." To the British public, however, India remained a symbol of empire's glory. The railways, the telegraphs, the irrigation canals, these were presented as proof of progress. Kipling, the poet of empire, captured the tone of paternal pride in his verse. "Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed, to serve your captive's need." It was a vision of duty and destiny, a belief that Britain ruled not for itself, but for mankind. Yet to many Indians, those words sounded like chains gilded in virtue. They call it civilization, one reformer wrote, but it feels like silence. By the late 19th century, the Raj had become the most elaborate colonial system in the world. It governed over 300 million people through a network of civil servants, soldiers, and native princes. The Indian Army, composed largely of Indian soldiers under British officers, became the empire's instrument abroad fighting in Afghanistan, Sudan, and China. "The empire rides on Indian shoulders," said one general, "and stands upon Indian feet." The irony was profound. The colonized had become the enforcers of colonization. Despite its injustices, the Raj also produced moments of extraordinary synthesis. The meeting of cultures, often uneasy, sometimes genuine, gave birth to new art, literature, and architecture. The Indo-Saracenic style blended domes and minarets with Gothic arches, adorning railway stations and government palaces alike. Indian poets like Rabindranath Tagore wrote in English, winning global acclaim while giving voice to a distinctly Indian soul. "Every nation must one day awaken," he wrote, "and find that it has been dreaming another's dream." The British, too, were transformed by India. The encounter forced them to confront the limits of their own ideals. Missionaries wrestled with the ethics of conquest. Officers fell in love with the land they ruled. Some, like William Jones and Charles Wilkins, devoted their lives to studying India's languages and scriptures. "I am not merely a ruler of India," one viceroy confessed. "I am its pupil." In the end, the empire that sought to civilize India found itself civilized in return. Yet the deeper wounds endured: famines, exploitation, and cultural arrogance eroded the moral foundation of British rule. By the dawn of the 20th century, India was no longer content to be the empire's jewel. It wanted to be its own crown. The great experiment of imperial stewardship had begun to crack under the weight of its contradictions. The British had given India railways, laws, and education, but they had also given it reason to rebel. The same networks that carried goods and soldiers would one day carry ideas of resistance. The same schools that taught loyalty would teach liberty. They sowed the wind, wrote Indian nationalist Gopal Krishna Gokhale, and now the storm is theirs. For nearly 200 years, Britain and India were bound together by violence and vision, by admiration and resentment. The relationship was never simple. It was both conquest and communion. The British Raj represented the zenith of imperial ambition and the beginning of its decline. It was the proof that empire could command the world, yet never its conscience. In 1901, when Queen Victoria died, the Indian princes mourned her as a sovereign, and peasants lit lamps in her honor. But others whispered that the age of empire was waning. The jewel still glittered, but its brilliance no longer blinded. Beneath its surface, a new light was stirring the light of a nation ready to stand on its own. The crown might still claim India, but India had begun to reclaim itself. By the middle of the 19th century, the British Empire stood astride the world like a colossus. Its red-painted territories stretched across every map, linking continents through trade, steam, and law. From the cold forests of Canada to the deserts of Egypt, from the mines of South Africa to the jungles of Burma, the empire reached its zenith. Queen Victoria, who had come to the throne in 1837 as a shy young woman, now presided over a dominion that encompassed nearly 1/4 of the planet's land and population. The sun never sets upon our empire, Victorians liked to say, and for the first time in human history, it was true. The 1850s and 1860s were the empire's age of confidence. Industrial Britain had become the workshop of the world, and London, its beating heart. Steamships departed the Thames for every ocean. Telegraph cables carried messages beneath the sea, and in the streets of the capital, the pulse of empire could be felt in every accent, currency, and costume. The historian Lytton Strachey would later write, "London was not a city, it was the visible will of an invisible world." In its ports, goods from every colony arrived daily: Indian cotton, Australian wool, Caribbean sugar, Egyptian grain, and African gold. The empire's arteries pulsed with commerce, but its lifeblood was contradiction, splendor built upon struggle, progress shadowed by pain. London was the empire's mirror. Its grandeur reflected both the glory and guilt of British civilization. Along the Thames rose the palaces of Parliament: St. Paul's Cathedral, and the domed power of the new financial district. Gas lights illuminated wide boulevards, while the underground, opened in 1863, carried clerks and laborers beneath the city's veins. Yet only a few streets away, in the East End, poverty and disease reigned. Overcrowded tenements housed families of 10 in single rooms. Children scavenged through refuse, and the stench of the factories thickened the air. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Dickens wrote, capturing an age when progress and misery marched hand in hand. Nowhere was Victorian ambition more perfectly displayed than in 1851, when Prince Albert, the Queen's consort, conceived the great exhibition of the works of industry of all nations, housed in Joseph Paxton's Crystal Palace, a vast structure of glass and iron rising from Hyde Park. It was the first World's Fair and a hymn to industrial might. 6 million visitors passed through its doors. Inside glittered the achievements of Empire steam engines, spinning machines, telescopes, fabrics, weapons, jewels, and exotic displays from every colony. India's pavilion overflowed with ivory, silk, and gemstones. Australia sent gold, Canada, timber, Africa, raw materials, and curiosities. Here, proclaimed Albert at the opening, we celebrate the unity of mankind through industry. But the exhibition also revealed something else, that Britain ruled a world both enchanted and unequal. To Victorians, the empire was proof of moral destiny. Missionaries carried Bibles to Africa. Teachers carried grammar books to Asia, and engineers carried rails across deserts. The poet Alfred Tennyson gave words to their pride. The heavens fill with commerce, argosies of peace, nations freighted wealth, and the warless years. Yet even as they dreamed of universal progress, the empire's foundations were stained with labor and domination. The cotton, spun in Manchester, came from plantations once worked by slaves. The railways of India were built by peasants paid a pittance, and in the mines of South Africa, black workers toiled under brutal conditions so that English drawing rooms could sparkle with diamonds. Queen Victoria herself embodied the paradox of empire moral restraint and imperial certainty. To her subjects, she was not just a monarch, but a symbol of stability in an age of change. Her portraits hung in colonial offices and village schools from Cairo to Calcutta. Her birthday celebrated as a near-sacred holiday. Yet the same reign that championed virtue also oversaw conquest. Under her, Britain annexed vast territories. New Zealand and parts of Australia became self-governing dominions. Canada achieved confederation in 1867. Egypt fell under British control in 1882. Burma was absorbed after 3 wars, and southern Africa became a battleground of gold and empire. God bless the Queen. Colonial subjects were taught to say, though few would ever meet the justice she promised. The Victorian world believed in progress as faith. Science and industry were its prophets. The railways bound continents together. The telegraph collapsed time, and medicine began to conquer disease. Charles Darwin's Origin of Species, 1859, shattered old certainties about creation, replacing divine design with evolution. To many, this confirmed Britain's place atop the ladder of civilization. Survival of the fittest, a phrase later borrowed by imperialists, became justification for rule. Social Darwinism transformed the empire's moral claim. What had begun as the spread of faith became the science of supremacy. We rule because we can, said Cecil Rhodes, the empire's most ruthless dreamer. The more of the world we inhabit, the better it is for mankind. While London exulted in progress, resistance simmered at the edges of empire. In Ireland, the Great Famine of the 1840s had killed over 1 million and driven millions more to exile, exposing the empire's indifference. In India, the 1857 Sepoy Rebellion had been crushed, but not forgotten. Its memory haunted both ruler and ruled. In South Africa, the Zulu and the Boers fought bitter wars against British expansion. And in the Sudan, General Gordon's death at Khartoum in 1885 became both tragedy and myth. The empire's borders were lines of conflict drawn in blood. At home, social unrest mirrored the empire's contradictions. The new industrial cities produced not only wealth, but alienation. Factory workers, miners, and women demanded reform. Chartists marched for voting rights. Trade unions organized strikes. "We build empires abroad," wrote reformer Annie Besant, while neglecting kingdoms of misery at home. The Victorian conscience wavered between pride and guilt. Philanthropy flourished schools, orphanages, and missions, but so did moral hypocrisy. Respectability became a mask for repression, and progress a substitute for compassion. Yet despite its faults, the Victorian era inspired awe. The empire's infrastructure reshaped the planet. By 1900, Britain controlled 2/3 of the world's undersea telegraph cables, ensuring that messages from Calcutta or Cape Town could reach London in minutes. The Suez Canal, now firmly under British control, shortened the route to India from months to weeks. Steamship lines such as Cunard and P&O connected continents in regular rhythm. The world's economy beat to Britain's clock, measured by the pound sterling, priced on London's exchange, and governed by English law. At the same time, the empire turned inward toward art, science, and spectacle. The Victorian imagination sought to capture its own vastness. Painters like J. M. W. Turner and Frederick Leighton celebrated industrial light and imperial scenes. Writers like Rudyard Kipling and H. Rider Haggard mythologized the empire's frontier, while novelists such as George Eliot and Thomas Hardy chronicled its moral costs. Museums swelled with plundered treasures, the Elgin marbles from Greece, the Rosetta Stone from Egypt, and countless artifacts from Africa and Asia. "We gather the world," declared the director of the British Museum, "so that mankind may know itself." But the voices of the conquered were rarely heard in those halls. By the 1880s, Britain's empire had reached its greatest territorial extent. Canada and Australia were prosperous dominions. Egypt secured the route to India, and the scramble for Africa divided a continent among European powers, with Britain claiming the lion's share from Cairo to Cape Town. The dream of Cecil Rhodes to build a railway unbroken from the Mediterranean to the Cape embodied the empire's arrogance and ambition. "I would annex the planets if I could," Rhodes once boasted. His fortune, drawn from the mines of Kimberley, financed scholarships meant to spread the spirit of English leadership across the world. It was the gospel of empire disguised as benevolence. But every height casts a shadow. The same empire that united the world through commerce also divided it through hierarchy. At home, critics began to question the moral foundation of imperial rule. The philosopher John Stuart Mill, once a servant of the East India Company, warned that despotism is a legitimate mode of government in dealing with barbarians, a phrase that revealed the paradox of liberal empire. Poets like Gerard Manley, Hopkins, and activists like William Morris decried industrial exploitation. The socialist movement took root. Women began to demand suffrage, and the first murmurs of anti-imperialism stirred among intellectuals. The empire's triumph was no longer unquestioned. It was on trial before its own conscience. In 1887, London celebrated Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee, marking 50 years on the throne. The streets overflowed with soldiers from every colony: Sikhs from India, Maoris from New Zealand, Canadians, Australians, and Africans marching in glittering parade. To observers, it seemed the very image of unity, a family of nations under one crown. The Queen, frail but radiant, rode in her carriage through cheering crowds. Yet behind the pageantry, cracks were spreading. Irish nationalists boycotted the festivities, Indian reformers demanded representation, and workers' strikes darkened the industrial North. The empire's harmony was illusion, held together by ceremony and steel. By the century's end, London was still the capital of the world, but its splendor was beginning to feel fragile. The Boer War in South Africa, 1899 to 1902, exposed the brutality behind imperial, rhetoric concentration camps, scorched earth, and moral outrage at home. We have the Maxim gun, wrote the satirist Hilaire Belloc, and they have not. The phrase summed up the age faith in progress turned to justification for domination. The empire, intoxicated by its own success, could not see that the same forces of technology and communication that had built it were now arming its critics. Even Queen Victoria, who had once believed in her empire's divine purpose, grew weary. In her final years, she withdrew into mourning and memory, her empire more vast than she could comprehend. When she died in 1901, newspapers declared, "The sun of the 19th century has set." Her funeral was both a mourning and a coronation for a new age. Soldiers from every colony followed her coffin through London's streets: Africans, Indians, Canadians, Australians marching under a flag that had bound them together, willingly or not. The Victorian era had given Britain its greatest confidence and its deepest contradictions. It had united continents and fractured souls. It had spread education and enforced subjugation. It had inspired ideals of progress while concealing inequities that would later demand redress. As historian E.P. Thompson later wrote, "The empire's greatness was not measured only in miles of territory, but in the distance between its ideals and its realities. The glory of the Victorians was real magnificent, creative, enduring, but so too was their blindness. In their certainty lay the seeds of decline. For even as they celebrated empire as eternal, the currents of nationalism, socialism, and self-determination were already rising beneath them. The empire at its zenith was also an empire at its limit. We stand upon a mountain," warned the writer J. A. Hobson at the century's close. "But the air here is thin, and the world below is restless." As the 20th century dawned, Britain ruled more people than any civilization in history. Its ships still sailed every sea. Its language and laws girdled the earth. But the first tremors of change had begun the distant rumble of voices demanding freedom, equality, and truth. The age of steam and faith, of invention and an empire, had reached its height. And in that height, the faint sound of unraveling could already be heard. The 20th century dawned with the empire at its zenith. The Union Jack fluttered over a quarter of the globe, and London stood as the nerve center of civilization, a capital of finance, fashion, and faith in progress. The Victorians had believed that peace and prosperity could stretch on forever under British guidance. Yet beneath the polished surface of empire, the tectonic plates of history were shifting. Nationalism was rising. Alliances were fracturing. And the machinery of the industrial age, once celebrated for its creativity, was about to be turned toward destruction. In the smoke of 2 world wars, the British Empire would face its greatest test, and ultimately, its reckoning. When the guns of August 1914 thundered across Europe, Britain was drawn into a conflict unlike any before. The Great War, as it would come to be known, was not merely a European struggle. It was a world war in every sense. The empire's dominions and colonies answered the call to arms. From Canada to Australia, from India to Africa, millions enlisted under the banner of the crown. The empire, for a moment, felt united in purpose. The lamps are going out, all over Europe, said Foreign Secretary Sir Edward Grey. We shall not see them lit again in our lifetime. What began as a defense of treaties and territories would become a crusade of survival. The numbers were staggering. Over 1.5 million Indian soldiers served in the British Army, fighting in France, Mesopotamia, and East Africa. Canadians stormed Vimy Ridge. Australians fought at Gallipoli, and Africans carried supplies through deadly jungles. The colonies provided not only soldiers, but also food, horses, raw materials, and taxes. It was, as historian David Reynolds wrote, the first time the empire truly fought as one. Yet unity came at a terrible cost. From the Somme to Passchendaele, from Ypres to Gallipoli, the trenches devoured a generation. Nearly 1 million British soldiers died. Millions more were maimed in body or mind. And though victory came in 1918, the triumph felt hollow. This is not peace, the poet Siegfried Sassoon wrote bitterly, but a silence between wars. The First World War changed everything. It drained Britain's finances, shattered its illusions, and stirred discontent across its colonies. The Dominions, having shed their blood for the empire, began to demand greater independence. Canada and Australia gained new status within the Commonwealth, while Ireland exploded into revolution. In 1916, Irish nationalists seized Dublin in the Easter Rising, declaring a republic. The rebellion was crushed, but its leaders became martyrs. And by 1922, Ireland was free, an open wound in Britain's heart. The empire that had once claimed to unite nations now saw its own foundations tremble. In India, too, the war had awakened a new consciousness. Indian troops had fought valiantly for the British cause, believing that loyalty would be rewarded with liberty. Instead, they returned home to repression and broken promises. In 1919, the Amritsar massacre laid bare the cruelty of colonial rule. British troops under General Dyer fired into a peaceful crowd, killing hundreds. The incident at Amritsar, Winston Churchill would later say, was monstrous. But for Indians, it was more than monstrous. It was the moment the mask of benevolence fell. Out of that wound rose a new leader, a man of quiet strength and unyielding will, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Gandhi's weapon was not the gun, but the conscience. Preaching ahimsa non-violence, he led millions in acts of civil disobedience, boycotting British goods, marching to the sea to make salt, and fasting in protest. His philosophy drew on both ancient faith and modern morality. And An eye for an eye, he warned, makes the whole world blind. To the British establishment, he was both saint and threat. To the people of India, he was Mahatma, the great soul. The British Empire, Gandhi once said, has enslaved not just our bodies, but our minds. We must free both. His words resonated across continents, inspiring movements from Cairo to Cape Town. The empire's moral foundation was crumbling from within. Meanwhile, at home, Britain itself was changing. The war had transformed its society. Women entered factories, driving the engines of war production. When peace came, their demands for suffrage could no longer be ignored. In 1918, British women won the right to vote, a revolution in its own right. Yet the peace that followed brought not renewal, but recession. The 1920s and 1930s saw economic turmoil, unemployment, and the Great Depression. Strikes paralyzed cities, and hunger haunted the industrial North. "We won the war," lamented one worker, but lost the peace. The empire that had seemed invincible now felt exhausted, its resources drained, its people disillusioned. And still, the storm was not over. Across Europe, new empires were rising, built not on commerce, but on ideology. In Italy, Mussolini's fascists marched under the Roman eagle. In Germany, Adolf Hitler promised vengeance and dominion. Britain, weary and wary, sought to preserve peace through diplomacy. Appeasement, Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain called it, believing he could contain tyranny with reason. But tyranny, once unleashed, knows no reason. When German forces invaded Poland in 1939, Britain once again declared war. The Second World War had begun, and the empire was called to sacrifice once more. This time, the threat was existential. The fall of France in 1940 left Britain alone against the Nazi war machine. In that darkest hour, one man rose to embody its defiance: Winston Churchill. His words, forged in history and hardship, rallied a nation. "We shall fight on the beaches," he thundered. "We shall never surrender." Under his leadership, Britain endured the Blitz months of relentless bombing that reduced London to rubble. Families slept in underground stations while the skyline burned above. Yet the island held firm. If the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, Churchill declared, men will still say, this was their finest hour. Once again, the empire answered the call. Troops from India, Africa, Canada, and Australia fought across Europe, North Africa, and Asia. The Indian Army alone fielded over 2.5 million men, the largest volunteer force in history. In Burma and North Africa, they fought and died beside British soldiers. But as the war dragged on, something profound changed. The colonies that bled for Britain began to question why they should fight for freedoms they did not possess. When this war is over, one Indian soldier reportedly said, "Will they finally see us as equals? Or will we still be their subjects?" By 1945, the answer was clear. Britain had survived, but at an unbearable cost. The war had bankrupted the empire. Its cities lay in ruins, its debt to America soared, and its people were weary of sacrifice. Yet the victory was not merely Britain's, it was the world's. Nazi tyranny had been defeated, but so too had the illusion of imperial permanence. The age of empires, said U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt, is ending. The torch of global leadership passed quietly across the Atlantic to the United States, while in the East, a new power, Soviet Russia, rose from the ashes. Between these giants, Britain's empire began to crumble. The first stone to fall was India. After decades of protest and imprisonment, Gandhi and the Indian National Congress demanded immediate independence. Britain, weakened and divided, could no longer resist. On August 15th, 1947, India was free. The joy of liberation, however, was marred by tragedy. Partition divided the land into Hindu-majority India and Muslim-majority Pakistan. Violence engulfed the subcontinent. Millions fled their homes. Hundreds of thousands were killed. Gandhi, heartbroken, walked among the refugees, preaching peace until his assassination months later. His dream of unity had died, but his vision had changed the world. With India's independence, the dominoes of decolonization began to fall. In the years that followed, Britain's empire unraveled with astonishing speed. Burma, Ceylon, and Malaya gained independence in Asia. Ghana, Nigeria, and Kenya followed in Africa. The Suez Crisis of 1956, a failed attempt to reassert control over Egypt's canal, proved the empire's final humiliation. Once the world's greatest power, Britain now found itself a junior partner in the shadow of America. Yet even in decline, its influence endured. The English language became the lingua franca of commerce and diplomacy. Westminster's parliamentary model inspired constitutions across continents, and the Commonwealth replaced empire with cooperation, at least in name. The world that emerged after 1945 bore Britain's imprint in every corner. The railways of India, the schools of Africa, the courts of Canada all echoed the empire's legacy. Its moral contradictions, too, remained. The same empire that had championed liberty had denied it to millions. The same nation that had preached law had profited from inequality. Yet, from its ruins, a new idea was born that global order could be built not on domination, but on dialogue. The United Nations, founded in 1945, met in the heart of a world once ruled by empire, but now ruled by ideals Britain itself had helped to shape: justice, diplomacy, and the rule of law. As the 20th century advanced, Britain transformed from conqueror to witness. The empire had fallen, but the Commonwealth endured an alliance of nations bound by history, language, and a complicated affection. The empire has gone, said historian John Morris, but the idea of Britain remains an idea of fairness, irony, and endurance. Even as flags were lowered and colonies reclaimed their names, Britain's influence lingered in classrooms, courthouses, and parliaments. Its power had faded, but its presence had not. The wars that broke the empire also revealed its humanity. The British people, tested by fire, discovered resilience that no empire could command. The soldiers who fought, the families who endured, and the nations that rose from the empire's shadow all became part of a shared story, the end of conquest and the beginning of conscience. We built an empire, wrote novelist George Orwell, but we could not govern our own hearts. By the mid-20th century, the British Empire was no more. The sun that had never set was finally sinking, but its twilight was not darkness. Out of empire's ashes emerged a modern Britain, smaller in power, but larger in spirit. It was a nation that had learned, painfully, that leadership meant more than dominion, that greatness could endure without empire. The wars had cost millions of lives and shattered illusions of eternal rule. But they had also forged a new understanding that freedom, once granted to others, must belong to all. When Queen Elizabeth II ascended the throne in 1952, she inherited not an empire, but its memory. The world she ruled was no longer bound by conquest, but by connection trade, language, and history. And though the empire's flags had been lowered, its echoes remained in every port, every courtroom, every story told in English. The empire had died, but its legacy lived on in glory, in guilt, and in the enduring conviction that history itself had once spoken with a British voice. When the last guns of the Second World War fell silent, Britain looked out upon a world it had once ruled and found it changed beyond recognition. The Red Empire on the map, once a source of pride and purpose, was now an echo of a bygone century. The colonies were breaking free, one after another. The dominions sought equality, not obedience. The nation that had stood at the summit of the world was weary, debt-ridden, and uncertain of its place. Yet in that uncertainty, a new chapter began, not of conquest, but of reflection. The moment that defined this transition came in 1956 along the banks of a narrow canal in Egypt. The Suez Crisis, as it became known, would mark the empire's twilight. When President Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal, a vital artery of world trade Britain, alongside France and Israel, launched a military intervention. The operation was swift and decisive on the ground, but disastrous in consequence. The United States and the Soviet Union, the new arbiters of world power, condemned the invasion. Under pressure from Washington, Prime Minister Anthony Eden was forced to withdraw British forces. The humiliation was total. The Suez Affair, wrote historian A. J. P. Taylor, was not merely a blunder, it was the end of an age. For the first time, Britain acted without command and discovered that it no longer ruled the world. Suez was more than a military defeat. It was a mirror held up to a changing reality. The empire's illusions dissolved overnight. The seas once patrolled by British battleships were now charted by American aircraft carriers. Sterling was no longer the global currency. London no longer the axis of power. But in that loss, Britain began to redefine itself not as an empire, but as a nation of influence. The age of gunboats had given way to the age of ideas. We can no longer rule by might, said Harold Macmillan, but we may yet lead by mind. From the ashes of empire arose something quieter, more complex, and perhaps more enduring: the Commonwealth of Nations. Founded officially in 1949, it was conceived not as a continuation of empire, but as its transformation, a voluntary association of equal states, bound not by force, but by friendship. Canada, India, Australia, Pakistan, and dozens of former colonies joined. Each had its own government, its own flag, its own destiny, but they shared a memory, a language, and a legal tradition. The Queen was no longer empress, but symbolic head of the Commonwealth, a figure of continuity in a world of change. The Commonwealth, she once said, bears no resemblance to the empires of old. It is an idea, a partnership of peoples seeking peace and understanding. This new identity, Global Britain, as it would later be called, rested not on domination, but on connection. The British discovered that influence could travel in subtler forms through language, law, and culture. English became the lingua franca of diplomacy, science, and trade. From New Delhi to Nairobi, from Sydney to Singapore, it was the language of ambition and aspiration. British law, with its principles of precedent, property, and justice, provided the foundation for legal systems across continents. The Westminster model of parliamentary democracy debate, accountability, and the rule of law took root in dozens of nations. Even where empire's memory was bitter, its institutions endured. But perhaps Britain's most powerful export was its culture. The same island that once ruled by empire, now ruled by imagination. Shakespeare was read in classrooms from Lagos to Lahore. The Beatles sang across borders. The BBC's broadcasts reached into homes on every continent. London, once the imperial capital, reinvented itself as a global city, a mosaic of peoples and voices from its former colonies. The streets of Brixton and Notting Hill echoed with Caribbean rhythms. The curry houses of Brick Lane and the mosques of Whitechapel reflected a new, multicultural Britain. The empire had returned home not as subjects, but as citizens. "We are not the empire's ghosts," wrote Salman Rushdie, "but its children, bearing both its scars and its songs."